From Eval Academy, this is Evaluation Conversations, a series about evaluation. What is it? How is it done? But most importantly, how can it make a difference in our world? I'm Shelby Corley, co-founder of 3Hive Consulting and Eval Academy. On today's episode, I'm talking with Hallborg and Lisa Kardosh of the REACH Edmonton Council for Safe Communities. REACH's mission is to strengthen community safety in our city and region through innovative ideas, building relationships, and inspiring action. Both REACH and 3Hive are based in Amiskwaciy-Waskahikan, also known as Edmonton, in Treaty 6 territory in Alberta, Canada. REACH acts as a backbone organization, supporting a variety of initiatives across our community. REACH contracted 3Hive Consulting to be its evaluation partner for 2 years of its Bridging Together program. You can find out more about Bridging Together and its evaluation on our website. In our conversation today, we discuss how REACH uses evaluation to make decisions and what challenges they see in incorporating evidence into planning. So hi, Holly and Lisa. It's nice to see you guys here. As you know, we're going to be talking today about evaluation and evidence and why it is that it seems to be so rarely used in organizations to drive decision making. One of the reasons I wanted to speak with the two of you is that I'm familiar with your organization, the REACH Edmonton Council, having been a contracted evaluator on one of your projects. And the impression that I got was that REACH is an organization that is interested in using evidence to drive decisions. And so I thought that you guys would have some interesting perspectives on why it is that REACH prioritizes that. And because REACH is also a backbone organization and works with a lot of other organizations, you'd have some perspective into the barriers that some of those groups face in incorporating evidence and data into their decision making. So why don't I start with, Holly, maybe if you want to tell us a little bit about REACH and then introduce yourself and then Lisa as well.
Sure, thanks Shelby. My name is Holly Hallborg and I'm a co-director of community initiatives at REACH Edmonton. I've been there for about a decade, so I think I'm fairly familiar with the ins and outs of the organization. We are Edmonton's Community Safety and Wellbeing Council. So we do our work in partnership with a number of agencies and organizations, not just the City of Edmonton and Edmonton Police Services, but a number of others to focus on community safety and well-being initiatives, because we really believe that the solutions for some of the challenges that exist, they really reside in community. So like you said, we are a backbone organization. So we don't do frontline service delivery ourselves. Instead, we kind of work behind the scenes and support our partners who do amazing work and just try and make their lives a bit easier by handling some things behind the scenes, like the reporting, some of the proposal writing, navigating funders, and also very relevant to today, making sure that there is evaluation of some kind happening and making sure that those activities are aligned amongst our partners.
Great. And Lisa, can you tell us a bit about your role at REACH?
Hi, I'm Lisa Kardosh, and I'm a project manager at REACH Edmonton. My work mostly revolves around youth and youth kind of initiatives, specifically newcomer youth. And yeah, I guess that takes a lot of different forms, but that's me.
That's you. Great. Okay, so I'm glad that we get to talk about these questions today. REACH funds a number of different initiatives across Edmonton. Does REACH have a sort of an overarching approach to evaluation? Is there something that guides how REACH, collects data and uses data and why?
Maybe just a really quick point of clarification that is small, but I think it's really important. And that's to say that REACH doesn't actually act as the funder we're more of the flow through organization. So we administer funds, but we don't actually have the funds that we distribute to our community groups, which has been a little bit confusing in the past. So it's just something that we try and take an opportunity to clarify when we can. Generally, we work in partnership with our community partners to go and seek those funds from other sources. So I guess just to kind of take a stab at that, we don't really have an overarching process, I would say. Hey, Lisa. I think it's really dependent on a few different things, including funders for our various initiatives, because it does differ, across all of the different things that we're involved with. It also depends on our partners and what their needs are. So yeah, it's more or less case dependent, I would say. Lisa, what do you think?
I would definitely agree with that. I think that we're not quite there yet with an overall approach, but I think it's a direction that we're certainly heading. And I think that's really exciting. But I mean, in each of our initiatives, we know that we should be evaluating it. And I guess it sometimes depends on the initiative, what we're going to look at, what the metrics are going to be, and that sort of thing. But in terms of like a flow through connector of the evaluations, I don't think we're there yet.
Okay. You've both been with REACH for a decent amount of time. Have you seen the approach to evaluation and learning change over time?
That's a good question. I would say it has. We've, I think, become more comfortable, with evaluation, and our knowledge has grown. We're not experts when it comes to evaluation. We don't evaluate our own projects. We often go to a third-party evaluator like you to help us out with that. I think we are more diligent about making sure that projects are evaluated, not just in situations where the funder says we have to, but instead making sure that there is some evaluation component built into our projects, regardless of the funder need or the funding source. And I think that the lessons that we've learned over the years, we've definitely brought forward and used in subsequent evaluations. So, where we've maybe run into a bit of a challenge, or we've had a pretty significant learning, then we try and make sure that we incorporate that into other projects.
Yeah, I think that over time, I think that, like as Holly mentioned, that it's something that we're more comfortable with now. I think that it's gone from, should we evaluate this, to we're going to evaluate this. Like it's become part of our culture in a more natural way.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
I'm interested in learning more about what you think drove that change. As you say, funders often have requirements for what needs to be reported. And, in some organizations, that becomes the sort of end of the data collection of the questions that you're asking. But so I know that in the project that we worked on with you, that you could have just reported the financials and some basic activity data, but you went beyond that and asked more questions about impact and process. What is it you think that drives that motivation within REACH to do that?
I think that using evaluation to be able to say something about your programs is really important, and it not just for the program and to better the program, to be able to see the gaps and challenges and point those out and be able to work to improve them, but also to be able to use the evaluation to apply for things like funding or something like that. I think that's really it's a really critical way for us to be able to show the value of what we're doing, because as Holly said, we are not hands-on. We're not providing frontline services, and so the evaluation, I think, for us gives us something tangible to point to and say, look, our work is making a difference.
Yeah, that's definitely true. I think it's also an opportunity for our various partnerships to celebrate, because you get so focused on the work, and there's ups and downs that I think evaluation is a really great way to show the great work that's happening. So I think that that's really helpful. I totally agree with what Lisa said about seeking additional funding. And I think that that's true in a couple of ways. So not just for the project, that you might be working on, but also for the partners. So with the findings from the evaluation, they can often apply those to other programs that they have, and potentially leverage it to obtain additional funding, kind of separate from whatever the initial project is, which I think is really fantastic and is a great thing for them, and helps them to really see the value of evaluation too, because it's it takes time, and it's not always easy. So to have that for their organization as a whole, I think is really beneficial too.
Right. Yeah. So you mentioned that REACH tends to go to a third party, a contracted evaluator. You do have some internal capacity for data analysis, though. Can you tell me a bit about what your internal capacity looks like?
Do you want to take a stab at that one, Lisa?
Sure. I think we're just recently, in the past year or so, we actually did hire on a data storyteller. And so that for sure has expanded REACH's internal capacity to be able to analyze data and present it. We do have a great communications team as well, who's able to take data and other boring numbers that some may find boring, and present it in a visually aesthetic way. But I think, where the real value for us having that third party evaluator is that it kind of separates the evaluation from REACH, and so the funds are already flowing through us. We're kind of overseeing the project a little bit, but to be able to have that distance from the evaluation, I think is really helpful to build kind of camaraderie around the evaluation and the evaluation result. We're able to sit with the partners and look at things critically. And it's not just REACH. If there's something bad in there, it's not REACH always giving the bad news.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Or good news.
Or good news. Yeah. Or good news. That's right. Yeah. So there's some evidence that says that even when organizations have access to evaluators, to data, to information products, that it still doesn't necessarily drive decision making. Can you tell me a bit about how REACH incorporates, or doesn't, evaluation findings and other evidence into its strategic planning, operational decisions?
Yeah, I think as we become more comfortable in this role, and we have been able to work on a number of different initiatives since we kind of came to be, and have gone through that process, I think that it just becomes second nature to go back to those things, because it's such a big part of our role. So we're able to go back, take a look, pull out what might be relevant for whatever we're working on. Whereas, for a frontline agency, often, again, you're very focused on the clients or the programs that you're providing, so you don't always have some may, but you don't always have the time to go back and to draw on that. So I think that that's partly why REACH has a role to play in that, is because we kind of have that at our fingertips. We're fairly familiar with it because we have worked closely with the evaluator. We may have even, presented about the findings at a conference, or worked on a particular communications piece that, kind of translates some of those findings. And so we're able to go back and draw on that for our decision making. That said, I think that there's always room for improvement on that, and that we can definitely do better. But I think that that's why REACH is kind of in the space that it is.
Mm-hmm. Lisa, maybe you want to take this next one. You work with many different organizations. Some are tiny, some are larger. What do you see as some of the challenges that they face in implementing more of an evidence-based decision-making process?
I think we all know that evaluating is something good, and it's something that we all should be doing. We know that information is powerful when used in the right way, but I think it's also overwhelming sometimes, and that there's so much information out there, and you're kind of like, well, which information is going to get me the results that I need, or which information is going to answer my questions. I think that within a lot of organizations, especially the small ones, there is no internal capacity for evaluation, at least not in a very thorough way. But so when they're applying for funding, I think it's really easy to if evaluation's not a requirement of the funder, I think it's really easy to say, well, do we really need it? We could take that extra evaluation money and it can help more kids, for example, or go towards the program. And so, I think that organizations who are so used to, just helping people in whatever way that they can, any extra money that they have, I think is, possibly better used in their minds towards just helping people. Even, I think they know that evaluation is important, but I think it's just a very difficult decision to make sometimes.
I would expect too that they probably face some dilemma in the fact that, if they are a charity and they seek donations as well, there's kind of this narrative out there that a leaner organization is a better place to send your donations. So the more money that's spent on direct service delivery, the better. And if you're spending money on things like management or process improvement or evaluation, that shifts that proportion that you see going to direct service delivery. So I'm sure that they're under real or perceived pressure to make sure that those funds do get directed to direct service delivery as much as possible.
I think that's a fair statement.
Yeah.
But I don't know, Lisa, I'd be interested to get your thoughts on this, but I feel like there is a bit of a culture shift where evaluation is becoming a little bit more of a priority, and the value is really kind of being better understood across the sector. Back to your point, you don't always know where to start. I mean, sometimes we're even like, oh boy, like how do we get this process rolling? So that's just one thing that I've kind of noticed. I don't know, Lisa, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the sentiment is changing. I think that, people realize that investing in evaluation will get them kind of those long-term gains, you know. But you know, yeah, from a, I think that is a good point though. But coming from a charity standpoint, you know, it's not sexy to invest in administration, you know.
Yeah, definitely not. But if you have a data storyteller, that position that REACH has sounds very cool, and I could see that being a compelling way to describe what evaluation intends to do. And on that topic, I'm sure evaluators are in need of some adaptations, some changes as well, to help facilitate the use of our products in making decisions. In your experience, what do you think evaluators need to be doing more of, do less of, do better to support organizations in incorporating evidence and data into their decision making?
Well, first off, I have to say that we've been really fortunate to work with some amazing evaluators like you. And I think one of the wonderful things about good evaluators is that they share their knowledge and the bring us right along in the process while they're doing it. So it's learning for the partners who are involved in the initiative, just as much as it's learning for the evaluator who's collecting the data and becoming familiar with the project. So I think that is something that I hope others experience too, and that can continue, because a lot of our internal capacity and our knowledge at REACH is because we've worked alongside really wonderful evaluators. So I think that's really fantastic. I think something that's really of value is when a funder may ask us to deliver a certain type of evaluation or a report, really ensuring that whatever the content is, not just does what the funder needs, but is also accessible to us and the other partners. So especially in research evaluation, sometimes things can get pretty jargony and a little hard to understand. So it makes it less accessible or less pleasant to go back to those reports or those findings and to incorporate them into decision making going forward. So I think trying to strike a balance wherever possible and really paying attention to language and presentation is really important. So I think that's kind of the main thing I would say. What do you think, Lisa?
I think that also, and this is something that 3Hive does really well, is making evaluation really easy to read and like aesthetically pleasing, because I think that similar to why people don't evaluate because they have no time, I think people often don't might not be reading evaluations, because they have no time, or if they read it once, then they might not come back to it later on. But I think though, if you have something that's eye-catching and easy to, that you can highlight the important findings in a neat way, I think that's easier to remember, and it's easier to read and come back to and be able to incorporate it into later decision making.
Mm-hmm. What about the process of developing the questions as well? Finding the right questions to ask can be as hard as finding the data to answer the questions, right? And in my view, as someone who helps to develop the questions, putting the time in at that stage of the evaluation plan yields so much more value in terms of having a product that you can take to your next strategic planning session and use to drive your mission.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think you definitely kind of have to work backwards in that way and think about, take some real time to think about what do you want answered from your evaluation. What questions do you need to know? How or what decisions need to be made, and then how are you going to get there, and what questions are going to help you get there. So I think if you don't have the right questions from the beginning, it's not going to be used.
Right.
Yeah. And I think also being really aware of how many questions are being asked. One thing that I've noticed is, sometimes when we're working on those questions, it can get really exciting to think of all the information that you can collect and how wonderful it would be to have it. But I think a role that evaluators can play and be helpful with is to temper that a little bit and say, okay, what do we absolutely need to ask? Because it's easy to ask for everything under the sun, but then when it comes to collecting that data, it's pretty overwhelming and not always the best scenario for the participant. So I think that that's something that can be helpful. I think also just being flexible and recognizing that we're working, with different community groups who have different priorities and different capacities. So just being really willing to go with the flow and recognizing that, there may be a plan at the beginning, but that's probably not going to be how things are going to unfold. So just being flexible, but also being clear where maybe there's less room to be flexible. Because we don't always know that when we're looking at the work on the ground. So being really clear about, okay, we can kind of relook at this, or we can change this, but to ensure that, we have a good evaluation, we probably don't want to change this too much. So that kind of guidance and support, I think, is really important.
Right. Yeah. REACH has a board of directors, is that correct?
Yes.
What do you see at that level in terms of, requests for information to base decisions on? How do you see your board using evaluation and evidence?
So our board is a governance board, so they're less engaged in the operations of the organization, but certainly provide important strategic direction for our overall work. And our board, we've been very fortunate. We've had some really engaged and great board members who have always been curious and interested to know about our initiatives. So it's fairly regular that we'll have an evaluator or a project manager attend a board meeting and actually present on findings from a particular project. So they're always very interested in hearing that, and definitely having our evaluator in the room along with whoever might be managing that program is helpful, because then any questions that might come up, there's the ability to answer those. And I know that they then take those forward, as they're planning or in their discussions. Our board also has regular generative discussions where they take emergent issues and challenges and really unpack those. And that helps to inform the direction of the organization as well. And I know for sure that these presentations and that information that we provide through our evaluations informs that as well.
Mm-hmm. I would also just say that I think the board is we try and select people who are connected to community and have lots of outlets to kind of speak about our work and be advocates for our work. And so when you give them an evaluation and give I think if they have something positive to say, they'll go and tell anybody who's willing to hear. And I think our board does a really great job of that. Yeah. And evaluation helps message that.
It sounds to me like evaluation, using knowledge to drive action really is permeated across the organization, from operational layers up through to the board. And that you're facilitating that drive with the organizations that you support as well.
Yeah.
Definitely. I'd say at every level of the organization, we have our data champions. Everybody knows it's important, and everybody knows it's the direction that we need to be going in and improving in too.
And a big priority for us is also sharing that information more broadly. So I guess kind of to the whole point of this conversation, there's a couple ways that we do that. So not only do we, seek out conferences where maybe we can attend virtually these days, but to share our findings and talk about our work, but also it's fairly common that we will do community report backs both during and at the end of our projects, just so that our broader community stakeholders have an opportunity to hear what's happened and what we found, and can ask questions. And again, we do that sometimes during the project as well, to provide kind of interim findings, because sometimes there's really helpful conversations that emerge from that can help us, for the rest of the project. We also produce some helpful communications material. So we'll take an evaluation report and distill it down into maybe a 2-pager that is easily printed and easy to distribute, where the language is really clear, really accessible, so that folks don't always have to, read through a whole evaluation report. They can often get a pretty good sense of what we found through evaluation just at a quick and really accessible glance. And also creating videos. We've done videos about the evaluation findings, which sounds like maybe kind of a boring video, but we try and make them really interesting.
I think it sounds like a very exciting video.
We think so, but yeah, so we use all of those processes and those tools to also share that information more widely.
You mentioned everything being virtual now. Just on a last topic to kind of tag on to this, has the pandemic changed anything about how REACH sort of seeks out data and uses data in making decisions about what's the next action?
Lisa, do you want to try that one?
Yeah, I mean, of course, the pandemic has changed things, and has changed the way that we work. But REACH, not to belittle it or anything, but I think REACH is always changing, and so it's just another thing to adapt to. We're pretty comfortable in a space of never knowing what tomorrow's going to look like, I think, and so. Yeah, I think it hasn't changed significantly. I think maybe just, the natural progression of where we're at internally with our evaluations is, yeah, I don't know if it's changed much. I think, yeah, maybe in other initiatives that I'm not
Yeah.
seeing.
I think the main thing is probably around the actual data collection. That's probably where the biggest impact has been. I think of our out of school time summer programming, and it's fairly typical to use paper surveys. Mm-hmm. And this year, of course, that wasn't an option because a number of those programs were online. And then, it's tough to get good completion rates through online surveys, especially when there's so many other things going on, both for the people who are administering the program and also the participants. So, mm-hmm. Some situations like that, I think, have meant that it's been a little bit more challenging. But to Lisa's point, like kind of from the REACH perspective, I think that we've tried to adapt and be flexible because it's kind of in our nature to begin with.
Right. Cool. Well, that's all the questions I have for you. I want to thank you for finding the time to talk about how REACH incorporates knowledge into action. I think it's a really interesting example for other organizations to see that it is an achievable goal, that you can really create this culture of relying on data and evidence to help drive your mission forward. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for joining us today. Sign up for the Eval Academy newsletter or follow us on Twitter for more in this series. Happy evaluating!